Good evening, everybody. How are you tonight? We're sorry about the little delay, but we had more people checking in. Welcome to the March program of Agenda Alexandria. For more than a quarter century, we have provided a public space for discussion and debate of issues that are important to the city of Alexandria and its citizens. The one tonight, obviously, has brought you all here. How many people here are members of Agenda Alexandria? Oh, super. And if you're not, you may enjoy tonight enough to become a member, because we are a membership organization. We have to rent this space and pay like our wonderful students from the high school to do our audiovisual for us. We have with us tonight not just the audience in place here, but we have a streaming audience, which is a sort of holdover from what we started during the pandemic, and we're glad to have people online watching. There will be an opportunity to ask questions, both online and in person. You'll see one or two people walking around with note cards. You can fill those cards out with questions. Just please write legibly, because I've got to read them. I'm happy tonight that our host is Michael Pope. Many of you know Michael as a sort of acclaimed local journalist. He's also been on the board of Agenda Alexandria for quite some time. A couple housekeeping things. Please mute your phone if you haven't done that yet. We don't want to hear those going off. Last month we had a program in this room which I really enjoyed. It was not a two-sided discussion, because it was about the history of Alexandria's African-American move towards justice and equality. It was a great panel. It's available online on our website for free if you want to watch it. I want to thank our presenting sponsors, Simpson Development, McInerney Associates, and the Zebra. And I'm going to let our moderator introduce the panel, but I want to make sure you have all read that statement. I tried multiple times to get representatives from Monumental Entertainment, JBG Smith, the owner of the property at Potomac Yard and the developer, and the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership to appear. Twice we were turned down. And I even sent them a last-minute email on Friday saying, you can change your mind. Just out of curiosity, is anybody here from Monumental or JBG Smith? Because if you were here, we'd be happy to throw another seat up on the stage and let you have your say. So we were unsuccessful doing that, and you can read into it what you want. In any case, I will not belabor my introduction, but thank you for coming so much. Ask questions. We'll probably usually go to about 8:15, but if we have a lot of questions that need to be answered, we'll probably end promptly at 8:30. So sit down and enjoy. By the way, there are refreshments left still, I think, on the table. Help yourself to water and or wine and snacks, and those of you who are watching online don't get that privilege. So anyway, thank you very much for being here. I'll turn it over now to our moderator and my fellow board member, Michael Lee Pope.
All right, we're going to have some fun tonight. Thank you so much for coming out. This is quite a group. We've been doing it here in the Lyceum for a number of years. I don't think I've ever seen a crowd quite like this, so thanks for coming out. This building was built in the 1830s for civic discussion, so actually we are in a long tradition of the actual original purpose of this historic building that we're in, so thanks for coming to the Lyceum. I am going to introduce our panel, starting with your left, all the way over here on stage right, is former Vice Mayor Andrew McDonald, probably not a stranger to most people in this room. He is obviously one of the founders of the Coalition to Stop the Arena, and I know that I have seen him in Richmond lobbying against the arena, so he could talk about his experience there. We've also got Dr. Dennis Coates. Give it up for our academic. Professor of economics. He's looked at these kind of sports stadiums all across the country. He's going to give us his wealth of knowledge. He's a professor with the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. He's looked at these public-private stadiums all over the country. We also have returning to Agenda Alexandria, Katie Wainick. Thank you so much. president of the Delray Citizens Association, but perhaps even more importantly, chair of the Stormwater Advisory Committee. You may remember we did an agenda panel back in 2021. It was actually the very first in IRL panel that we did after the pandemic. So thanks for returning to Agenda Alexandria. And we also are very pleased to be joined by Tom Kopko of Cameron Station. Thank you so much for joining us. He's not only involved in the Cameron Station Civic Association and Homeowners Association, he's also a member of the Old Town Citizens Association and the Delray Citizens Association, so he's all over the city, and he's here speaking in his personal capacity. He is also, this is very important, a supporter of the arena. We're going to be nice to Tom Kopko. We're not going to boo him. All right, I know there are lots of people in this room that don't like the arena, but we're going to be nice to Tom Kopko. He's our friend and a member of Agenda Alexandria, so thank you for being a member. All right, I'm going to start with a very unfair question, but it's just too delicious, and I'm not going to give it up. I'm going to start with you, Tom Kopko, and we're going to go across the panel here. So it's an unfair question, but it's the panel. Literally, several people have already asked me this question tonight. And when I'm in Alexandria, when I'm at the grocery store, when I'm at the gym, this is the question people always ask: is this thing happening or not? Tom Kopko, I'm going to start with you.
I mean, we don't know. It could. There's lots of game to play. So, I think, frankly, there's some very big power plays left to play, both on, I think, the governor's part. He's got tons of vetoes and those sorts of things still to consider. Amendments that he can send back to the legislature, a budget that could be sent, and then there's special session. So, I mean, it's not looking great at the moment, but there's tons of other game to play. So, there you go.
The General Assembly is going to reconvene on April 17th. The governor could send down a budget amendment, and even after April 17th, the governor could call a special session whenever he wants to. The problem is he's going to run up against the same opposition that he ran up against during the General Assembly session. So it does seem like it might be in trouble right now. Katie Wainick, this is the unfair question to you. Is this thing happening or not?
Sorry, my voice is a little croaky tonight. Same answer. I think that it is highly unlikely to happen. However, we've not seen the end of the discussion. We've not seen the end of this yet. I think that if this, in all likelihood, will not make it out of Richmond, and I think it'll mostly be because of egos getting in the way. I think that you've got those big power players at the table, and their egos, I think, are getting in the way of good conversation, whether it's for or against it, right? They're not having the discussions, and that's the question I think we need to be asking. So I think it's highly unlikely it makes it to Alexandria for discussion, but it is still possible.
Dennis Coates, I'm going to modify the question a little bit for you because you have looked at these all over the country. Have you ever seen a situation where you've had this level of opposition and the thing be successful despite all of that?
In a way, you anticipated my answer to the original question, which was, do I think it will happen? My answer was going to be, maybe not now, but these things never die. You can say no over and over again, and they will find a way to bring it back. That's the history of these sorts of things. So you have to remain vigilant if you're in opposition to it, and if you are in favor of it, if you don't win it this time, there's always next year. So my answer is, this year, I don't think so, but I don't know. In the next 5 years, very possibly.
5 years of this. Okay, all right. Buckle up. Former Vice Mayor Andrew McDonald, but I'm going to put the same question to you. Now, you were in Richmond lobbying all the lawmakers. I saw you at Elizabeth Bennett Parker's office. Do you think this thing is dead, or is there a chance this could still happen?
Well, I want to thank Elizabeth Bennett Parker for voting no in the House vote early on. We should thank her. I certainly hope it's dead. I don't think it's should be a matter of egos necessarily. I think it should be a matter of, is this plan good for the community, good for Alexandria? I don't think it is. So I'm certainly hopeful that it will not not pass. And I think we should all be concerned when you have a budget where the governor vetoes domestic violence legislation, considers an arena more important than that. So I think on the merits, this project should fail.
All right, Professor Coates, I'm going to start with you on this one, which is about the concern that the data that we're not receiving is proprietary. So after the governor made his announcement about the 30,000 jobs that would supposedly be created by this thing, I wanted some details, and I've hit up the city and I hit up the economic development people, and they stonewalled and they wouldn't answer questions, and then 54 days later they gave me a one-page document that had a very small amount of details, and they said, look, we never intended to release this information at all, and it's proprietary. Professor Coates, is this like standard operating procedure? I mean, is this something that we see in all these kinds of things where they just won't give you data and information, or are there examples where they are actually transparent and share information?
So it's hard to generalize in a way, but generally speaking, they will provide what I call the glossy PR nonsense. And I'm pretty sure that you've all seen such things already. What they less likely are to provide is the actual analysis that somebody can read and discuss and tear apart, because they don't want people to be able to actually critically evaluate what they've done. Periodically, such things become available. Some places release them, thinking that they're providing the evidence for their proposal that they want, when if you clearly look at them, there's a variety of mistakes that are commonly made. And I say mistakes when it could be that they are inadvertent, it could be that the people doing it don't know that they're doing it, or it could be intentionally misleading. These reports generally will have a disclaimer that says third-party information was not verified. And basically what that means is that the people who hired them to write the report gave them some numbers, say number of people who will attend, number of events that we will hold, things of that sort. And so they build a report based on these numbers without ever finding out if those numbers are meaningful, accurate, or reliable. And so, you know, the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. If you make bad assumptions, you're going to get bad results. And the evidence is that they typically produce very bad results.
Tom Kopko, I'm going to put you on the spot as our resident supporter of this thing. Probably unfair to throw all these questions at you, but I'm going to anyway. The argument here that I'm getting from the Alexandria Economic Development Partnership people is, hey, look, this is a private negotiation. We are still negotiating this thing. We cannot give you information while we're negotiating this thing. And yet they want public financing for their private deal that they're still financing. Is that a problem?
So, I'm not an economist, but I do put a lot of deals together. And in business, you have non-disclosure agreements for reasons, so you can put your deal together. You have to put your deal together in order to present it. You can't have the entire world negotiating. Has everybody been in a 400-person committee meeting? You can't have a 400-person committee meeting. You have to put your deal together, which, from what I read, that's what they did. They put the deal together up until really the last minute last year. They put it together all year through hard negotiations to try and get it right for the taxpayers, like me, and like I think everybody else. And they got it to me, one heck of a deal. Zero public financing, zero taxpayer dollars for this. And then they put it through the bipartisan Virginia MEI. And it got bipartisan, unanimous support out of that. And after that, after it got that seal of approval from the Virginia legislature, which is the MEI, then they presented a valid deal. And that's when they made their announcement from everything I have read. I have no inside information, but that is everything I've read. So non-disclosure agreements to allow all that to happen, and I think all this background information, all of the data was provided to all those people all the way through, including the MEI. And after that, it got approved and it was released to the public. So I think they just thought it was one heck of a great deal. It got the MEI's approval, which, according to what I've read, is normally a rubber stamped by the legislature.
Well, we're not taking questions from the audience. If you have questions, you want to write them down on your postcards.
So, I'll answer that. Major Employment and Infrastructure Commission. Bipartisan commission. Again, I'm just reading the internet. I do a lot of research. So they finished the deal and then presented it as soon as they could. And it feels like a surprise. I was very surprised at the beginning. But when you look at what has to go through, you have to go through to put the deal together, according to the timeline, it was tough, and they announced it as soon as they could.
So the question is about proprietary information. Katie Waynick, I'm going to go to you next. So the city says 30,000 jobs, but then when you ask them for data, they said, well, we're not going to give you the data because we're still negotiating it. I mean, is it, should this kind of documentation be available to the public if they expect public financing?
So again, this is also from my understanding and conversations that I've had with a variety of people and players in this game. There's a lot that still has to be answered based off what comes out of Richmond. And that's been the case from December when the announcement was made until now. And so what I've expected to see and what I think would be happening is that we would be getting a lot more information once this got out of Richmond. Things still have to be defined by that legislation, up to and including what the district is, what defines the district. That's a huge detail that Richmond gets to decide. Well, what does that entail? That's the taxes. That's the money that goes back to the bonds that pays for this. All of that has to be in that legislation that passes. And so there were a lot of assumptions made that went into this deal that maybe we will, maybe we won't know the answers to. I would like to see more than the 7 pages, personally. I think that was too few. Do we need to see the whole document? No, because these are power players and there's no other, I don't know of any other situation where you could ask a corporation, give me this entire presentation and you're gonna get it. More than 7 pages, I think, would be absolutely something we should ask for. What I want to see, though, is if this gets out of Richmond, then I wanna see more. Because I think we're also asking some of the wrong questions. You know, we've heard a lot lately about $75 parking, and let's all laugh at how that's crazy. Well, if you've been to some of these meetings, local association presidents have been to meetings with JBG representatives, meetings with Monumental representatives, AEDP representatives. I got to sit across the table from our city manager and Stephanie Landrum in a room with less than 15 people in it. And we got to ask some of these questions, and they were incredibly open with us. They're not hiding information. We need answers from Richmond to be able to define some of these things. And so I think that if this is to make it out of Richmond to a city level discussion, you'll start to see more of this. So back to that parking example, for instance, you want to know why $75 parking is in this agreement, or not agreement, but in this plan? Well, it's because they want to incentivize people to park in Crystal City. That goes into a multi-levered plan, and I think the question we need to be asking is, okay, this is a great idea. How do you make it work? How do you make it so that Monumental incentivizes it in a way that people do that rather than parking in Delray, rather than parking in Lynn Haven and in Hume Springs and everywhere else? So I think that it's really important as we go through this whole process, if it continues or if it comes back 5 years from now, to ask the right questions, right? And I think by asking those questions, you can actually get more of the data out. Instead of just saying, I want more data, dig into what they're giving. Ask, why was this done this way? And then you get more data, you get more information back. And then you have a conversation, and even if you don't like the answer, and even if you still don't like the arena, you will learn a lot more than just yelling, yelling, yelling.
Yeah, that's true, but they sometimes don't ask the questions even if you're not yelling the questions. I've spent several months trying to get details from them about the 30,000 jobs, and in a very polite, respectful way, they would not answer them. So, former Vice Mayor Andrew McDonald, I'm going to tailor the question a little bit for you, which is a little bit different. So, about proprietary information that they want to keep secret, despite the fact they want public financing. When you were a member of the city council, you would go in the back room. You would meet an executive session that was not open to the public. I mean, isn't a lot of the stuff the city council does on a regular basis, done in secret?
Sure, but it's usually tailored to a very small decision that is not. I'd answer the question this way about proprietary. We're not a corporation, we're a community. None of this information should be proprietary. And the idea that we would wait till the General Assembly passes legislation to fund this thing, over $1.5 billion of public tax dollars that we have to backstop if it fails, and before we get information, makes no sense at all to me at all. I've applied for a FOIA with the City of Alexandria now, December 27th. I have received 0 documents in 3 months. They claim that a lot of it is proprietary. I don't believe that, but we haven't received 1 document. One of our FOIAs found out the MuniCap study that you may have seen the Washington Post report on, which discussed the projections were much rosier than Monumental and the city claim, for instance. So we've had to go to FOIA to try to get the information that the community should have been given right from day one. We recently learned, for instance, that the House leadership was going to do an independent study, so to speak, in Richmond. Did they ever do it? We just found out, no, it was never done. So I would argue that the most important thing we can do when we have a development project like this is to engage the community up front with all the information and let the community decide whether it's good. Not just come in and say, this is a done deal, trust us.
Did you want to respond to something you just heard? Okay.
So, all right, so about the MuniCap report. It seems to be proprietary information, just like the JP Morgan Chase stress test, but it wasn't kept that secret. The legislature had it. The committee members in the House and the Senate all had it. Yet, certain people are being blamed for keeping it secret. Well, what about EBP? She had it. Did she disclose it? Did she talk to everybody in this room about it? Did she reveal the report? No, she did not. And ask yourself why not. I'm not saying she did a bad thing. I'm saying don't blame everybody else for something that she kept secret as well. Everybody in the legislature kept it secret. That's why you had to FOIA it. So it's a little bit much, frankly, to blame one side when everybody kept it secret.
All right, so I want to get a reflection here from our professor about something that Stephanie Landrum told me when I interviewed her last week. So it took me a long time to get Stephanie Landrum to go on the record, but was able to interview her last week. And one of the questions I asked her is, okay, give me an example of when this has ever worked. Because what you hear a lot of times, especially from the academics, is this never works. In the 40-year history of public financing for these kinds of things, it's always a bad deal for taxpayers. So I asked Stephanie Landrum, okay, so what's your best case scenario here for an actual example of when this has done well? And she pointed to Atlanta, the Battery District of Atlanta. Professor Coates, I know that you have looked at this. Give us your analysis of whether or not that was successful, and what it says about this project that Stephanie Landrum points to the Atlanta example, which is not just a singular event. It's an entertainment district. That's why she pointed to it. Is it's not just a singular facility. It's an actual district. What do you make of that analysis, Professor Coates?
A very good friend and co-author of mine, J.C. Bradbury, who lives maybe a long baseball throw from the Battery and from Truist Park in Georgia, analyzed the claims about the benefits from the Battery related to tax generation, sales going on in the Battery, and so on. And his analysis was that it did not come even remotely close to what they claimed it would do, and it in fact was not beneficial at all. So I've looked at his study and I agree with his methods and his approach. Would I have come up with exactly the same answer? I don't know. But I know that I trust what he did, and I evaluated what he did, and I find it credible and believable. It is easy to claim that these sorts of things generate lots of benefits when you have a very, very narrow and parochial view. So did it generate more business in that area? I have no doubt that it probably did. On the other hand, those people that were spending their money there used to spend it someplace else. And if that was the same general area, then you're not going to see any impact on the total sales and total tax revenues. If they were all from Atlanta, and Truist Park is actually in Cobb County, a suburb of Atlanta, then great, you brought a bunch of money from Atlanta there. And I think that this idea of the Potomac Yards Arena is very similar to that. If you think about the metropolitan area of Washington, is it going to generate anything for the metropolitan area? Absolutely not. All it's doing is moving it 5 miles across the river. Is it going to do anything here? Maybe, but you know, a lot of people from Virginia will not go to their own neighborhood. So somebody from Manassas isn't going to be going to a store in Manassas or a restaurant in Manassas. They're going to come down here. Is that going to be beneficial for Virginia? No, it does nothing. All it does is redistribute income from one neighborhood to another. And for my money, if you want me to redistribute money, you got to give me a better reason than because some billionaire wants it.
So I was asking about, examples of maybe when this was successful. The obverse of that question is examples of when this was not successful. I would open that up to our panel if anyone has any thoughts about other examples of public financing for sports arenas that have either been successful or unsuccessful that you would want to talk about in reference to what's happening here in Alexandria. Former Vice Mayor Andrew McDonald.
I'll give an example. District of Columbia. What did Abe Poland do? He invested in the community. He put his own money into it. And it's benefited, I think, the district tremendously. So why would we want to poach something from our neighbor and bring it across the river? I think it's, Roger Knoll, who's a sports economist at Stanford, said to us, we had a meeting with him, he said, look, if you have you put a few $100 million of public money in it, some of these projects can break even. You do more than that, they're all losers. They don't generate income. So, there's so many development strategies that we could have in Alexandria that I think the community could get behind. And that's where we should be investing our money, not in an arena that should stay in the District of Columbia. It benefits the community there.
In one of the many public hearings that happened about this, I remember that question being put to the city council members, and one of the city council members said, look, if the situation were reversed, DC would take our jobs. I mean, like, this is a dog-eat-dog world we live in here. Like, we're not in this just for everyone's benefit, that if DC had the opportunity to steal a team from Alexandria, they would do it. What's your reaction to that?
What's my reaction to that? Well, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's what we should be doing. I think we should be helping our neighbors. I don't know that they would necessarily do it. But the bottom line is we don't need to do this. And it's not good for Alexandria for a whole host of reasons. We haven't talked about a lot of the reasons, from gridlock to public financing to hurting small businesses, most likely. We don't need this project, but we do need development in Potomac Yard. We just don't need this particular one.
Tom Kopko looks like he's got a lot to say.
I'll say again, I'm an Alexandria taxpayer. And some of our panelists said, for my money, we shouldn't do this in Alexandria. Well, I'm from Virginia, I'm from Alexandria, and I pay taxes here, and I care about how much money I pay in taxes. And I thought everybody else around here did too. So you ask what project is profitable? The same one that wants to come here. It's generating $25 million a year in profit for DC. So there's a great example, the one we're going to get. And that reminds me, everybody says it's going to just put a black hole in the middle of DC. DC is going to absolutely fail if they don't have this amazing arena. But the same people say it's going to be an absolute financial disaster if it comes here. I mean, that simply does not make sense at all. At all. So,
We do have supporters in the room.
said, why poach our neighbor? They poach us all the time. That was said way in the beginning. They'll take our business, and they do. And we take theirs sometimes too. And this is a great one. And, of course, in Alexandria, this city that we all pay taxes in, we all know our commercial tax base is declining precipitously. Precipitously. Which means everybody who pays taxes in here, you're going to keep paying more. A lot more. This year, what are they advertising? 4 more cents? After an average of 2 or 3% property value increase? That's a big increase, and you know what? It's going to happen year after year after year. What does this arena give us? It gives us $33 million a year in profit. $25 million of that is going to be spent on infrastructure. $25 million per year over 35 years. What does that add up to? A lot of infrastructure. And about $9 million to start with in the first year in just excess profits. That we can do whatever we want with it. I say that's going to keep a lid on my taxes, and yes, I think it could actually reduce our taxes. It's a nice thought, isn't it? So it could.
I know our professor has some thoughts about that because you've looked at these kinds of deals and you have seen whether or not this has lowered taxes in other jurisdictions, and what have you found?
Just so many things about what you just said that are just completely wrong. There is no evidence whatsoever that tax revenues have increased after the creation, the opening of a stadium or arena. Every bit of evidence that looks at stadiums and arenas over time after they've been built, not the projections that the people who are going to benefit from this give you, but the actual facts show no increases in revenues. And just think about it like this. If you spend money here as opposed to there within the same community, there is no extra taxes generated. There is no evidence in favor of this sort of thing. Just none. It's never been found.
So, can you wait? Yes. Yeah, quick question on that. So if that logic holds true, that one to the other there's no more, then why do we have a conversation on traffic changing?
What do we have? What?
It's apples to oranges. I get that. But think about it. If we're just talking about moving from one to the other, and it's not going to shift much, then why do we have all these other concerns? And I think it is because there's something valid. Maybe it's not more, but my question has always been, one of the things we've heard a lot about in the survey that we took is the tax question. And it is, what do we do about our taxes? It's this realization that we're going to keep going up. What do we do about our commercial tax base, right? And so I think that just limiting the discussion to saying this doesn't show that and cutting it down, again, we should be asking different questions, right? Like, what do we do then? What is our plan B? If this isn't it, what development do we put in Potomac Yard? Because the small area plan calls for it to be a densely developed district with entertainment. Entertainment district is in that small area plan, and that plan was put in place long before this came up. I don't think anyone had arena on their bingo card, but entertainment district is in that small area plan. I know I sit in a room with a lot of people that value those small area plans, so I would like to know, what do we do differently? What goes in that district? that helps our tax revenue, that works with this commercial base, that gets us what we need so that we don't have to keep seeing these increases in our taxes.
So, Katie Wade, you just said something that reminded me of something that Stephanie Landrum told me, is that when they very first started looking at this, they were sort of doing an A or B comparison. So, there's the sports arena is one, thing they're looking at. The other is what would happen otherwise, under other, without the proposal, how would this area likely be redeveloped? And essentially, it's 3 large apartment complexes with ground level retail, which is kind of what the area already has. I mean, it's essentially more of the same, right? So I think the point that you were making was this is something sort of new and exciting as opposed to more of the same, right?
Well, no, I mean, entertainment district, like the small area plan does call for this to be a district that brings people in, right? And that was in place before the arena came on the scene. If you do control find on the small area plan, I forget how many times entertainment district comes up. I didn't believe it. I looked at it myself. And this was put in place before this came up. And so my question is, what do we put there? And I've also been told that commercial office buildings were some of the first things that were slated to go in. Well, we know where that's going. CRE is probably one of the next bubbles, if there's a bubble to happen. We don't want to build more offices. So what do we do there? What is our plan B? What do we do? What type of entertainment district meets what we want without exceeding it and having us all, again, yelling?
I'll put that question to Andrew McDonald. So, what's wrong with having an entertainment district? What's wrong with having something that's new and exciting in this area that's not more of the same that we've already seen for block after block after block in Potomac Yard?
Well, I mean, I like the Birchmere. That's entertainment district, so we would like to protect that. North Old Town is trying to have an entertainment district, and so we do have entertainment that we need. So I think there's 2 questions here. One, which gets to Dennis's point. I mean, is this project really going to generate the revenue the city says it does? And by all means, we don't think it will. So why would we be investing this much money, public money again? I mean, again, when we say this is all new money, it isn't all new money. It comes out of our taxpayers, out of the credit rating of both Virginia and Alexandria. So every dollar that's invested for this project to build this an arena. I mean, arenas don't cost $1.5 billion, but that's what he wants. All that money, if it doesn't generate the revenue to pay off the bonds, we will be holding the bill in the end. And this is not 10 years down the road, 20 years, it's 40 years that we have to project this kind of revenue growth. And that's really very difficult to do. So I would argue that this is simply not a good development strategy to begin with. What do we do differently? Well, Allison Silverberg, who was our former mayor, would argue we need more Virginia Tech type things, more of that kind of corridor and development. We need to balance out things like that.
Virginia Tech doesn't pay taxes.
But the point, I think,
Can I ask a quick question? Does Virginia Tech's campus, will they pay taxes? How does that work?
Well, they contribute to the community they are
taxes?
bringing business and other things to Alexandria. So
I asked about taxes.
Well, can I cut in here? Because it's actually really important to know that the authority will own the property and lease it to Monumental. So by entering into the authority, you take all that property off of the property tax rolls.
But that's the district question I mentioned at the very beginning. Richmond defines the district, correct? So we need to know how Richmond defines the district to know if phase 1 is just the arena and that is the district, that's what you speak of. But if there are other phases of construction not defined in that district, then the arena would not have the financing to pay back the bonds from that, correct? That's why the district is so important to this. Understanding what that definition is so important to this. Correct?
Professor, do you have some-
Did I read that correctly?
And it is built into the House bill. There are phases of development which eventually would end up that you'd have 70 acres. In other words, they're so concerned that this project will pay off the bonds, so concerned that they expanded the area to include most of that area of Potomac Yard. In other words, they were worried that you wouldn't have enough revenue to pay the debt. So I don't think that's a very encouraging thing to think that you're going to take 40 years of revenue and hope that it pays off the debt when it may very well not. But back to the question that's being addressed here is what kind of revenue, what kind of growth do we need to affect all of our taxes. You know, I've been in Alexandria a long time. I grew up here. And in the last 20 years, our tax bills have been going up with all the development we've had. We haven't really been able to control it very well. So we've had lots and lots of development. So I think it's sort of a pie-in-the-sky idea to think that somehow an arena is going to come into Potomac Yard and suddenly our taxes are going to somehow be, you know, we're not going to have to raise them as much, or we're not going to have to raise them at all. Bottom line is, I think the community should have the final say in the kind of development, because it affects our quality of life. We all are concerned about taxes, but above all, we want to live in a place that we want to share with our family, and our children. So I think it's more than just about, you know, diversifying the tax base. I think it's
Only
about
one side of Richmond did.
developing, you know, development that improves our quality of life long term.
All right, let me say something about bonds. All right, bonds are a loan. Loans are paid off over time. This one's over 40 years, and we get a profit every year after we pay off the annual bond payment. Yes, the bond. Listen, bonds are a loan. Gets paid off. This one gets paid off over 40 years. This project produces far more than the bond payment. Oh, yeah, I hope.
Don't we all hope?
And the numbers are there. The numbers are. In fact, that reminds me. So don't argue with me.
We're going to
Look,
listen
this
to
is
our
not
panelists.
the way it's going to go.
We're going to listen to our panelists.
Look. Some people complain that this is not put together conservatively. Again, I don't have any inside information. I read everything that's been put out. There is over 2 times the amount of revenue necessary to cover the bonds that are paid off a little bit over every year. And the excess that is produced by this project comes to Alexandria. Year 7, I think, is 33 million, 25 million, like I said, goes into infrastructure, 9 million to do whatever we want. And an interesting thing that came out the other night at the Old Town Civic Association is Kendall Taylor, the city's finance manager, said if there was another pandemic and not a single game was ever played at this arena, Alexandria would be on the hook for $25 million a year. You know what she said? That is nothing. We will have our AAA bond rating forever with an additional $25 million a year. That's our exposure on these bonds. That's all it is. The risk is so minimal, and JP Morgan stress tested it. So that's our risk. And I would really suggest that arena opponents look at the numbers. There's a lot of fear mongering. And from some of these panelists over here, I haven't heard a single dollar figure. I hear fear-mongering. I hear things in the past have happened this way. I don't hear any analysis of this actual deal. And I'll tell you what, DC wants to keep it so bad, they're willing to put up $500 million. That seems like a billionaire might like that. But instead, he's putting down $500 million to come here. He's paying $503 million in cash to come here. He's given up 500, he's paying 503. That's $1 billion swing to come here. So who's getting the bad end of this deal? I say the billionaire. He's paying a lot of money to come here.
Can I respond to the car?
I love it when people phrase things in a provocative way. I appreciate that. I do that myself. Anyone else anyone on the panel
Can I
want to?
respond?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
So,
Katie.
yes, someone wrote in, Richmond defined the district as 70 acres. The one side, I believe it was the House, defined it as 70 acres. This is one of those facts. To continue saying this is a done deal is fear-mongering. It's not a done deal. There were a couple ways that this could come to Alexandria that if you talk to our city council, completely, totally, 100% said this is dead on arrival. One of them was the authority itself. And this has been reported many times. This idea that we pay 50%, that we're on the hook for paying 50%, but we didn't have at minimum 50% representation on the authority, was a way this was going to get killed immediately by coming here. I guarantee you, I haven't talked to them personally about this, But if the district comes through defined at 70 acres, that's a really big deal. And I guarantee if you walk up to a city council person with this statistic in hand, they're going to be impressed that you have actually read further in than the fear-mongering. And they're going to agree with you because this does have the implications back to how the bonds are paid. Bonds are loans. We're not paying any up front. So I was asked to come because of a survey, so I have a lot of survey data up here. One of the main things that I've heard from my neighbors that are closest to this is the financing. One of the things that I've heard most, not most, but from a number of people is I could be swayed to be behind this, but I'm worried about the financing. We want to know about this district. We want to know how the TIFs work. We want to know what are they defining? And when you talk to JBG about this question, this gets them fired up too. Why? Well, think about it. If the district is defined at all 70 acres, they're not making as much profit either. Because now the authority, to Michael's point, owns that land and the arena and everything underneath it, lease it, and have to pay back into the bonds. So this district question, again, are we asking the right questions? No, we're not. Dig into what's been out there. There's a lot of information already out there. And these are the questions we need to be asking because we could make more revenue if this district is appropriately sized. If it's not appropriately sized, this is one of the things we need to be really upset about. The authority itself, Alexandria, if this comes through to Alexandria, needs at least 50% representation on that because people in Richmond do not need to be telling us what needs to be happening in Potomac Yard. City of Alexandria needs to be able to have significant say in what is happening at Potomac Yard.
Katie Waynick, you just mentioned the survey, which I want to do a follow-up because we've got a question from the audience. Have the interests and preferences of the younger generation been surveyed? Talk a little bit about that, and then just the survey results in general that you want to.
Oh, yeah. So forgive me, I'm going to look down at my notes because I want to make sure to be accurate. So my board has incredible talent behind me. I could not do the majority of what I do as president without the people that are constantly working behind me to help me out. One of our board members does surveys, and so she said, why don't we do this? And here's how I would like to lay it out. So a couple of pieces of context. She set it up so that every survey link was a one-time use link. It was very important to us that this not be gamed. It was very important to us that people couldn't put this link out there and have the same person take it 100 times, right? Which came in handy because one person did break it and we learned about it. And because of how it was set up, we were able to very quickly determine all of the erroneous results and remove them from the data. And we did that because we used verified lists. What do I mean? It was easy for us, right? We could just send out a newsletter to our membership and be done. But we also wanted it to be more representative of the other associations that were around. So we opened the opportunity up and 3 other associations signed on to join us. So we also had Rosemont, Lynn Haven, and Hume Springs participate. Each group kind of defined their membership list a little bit differently. All of this is on the internet. Google Delray Citizen Association, and you can see all of the methodology there. But what you need to know is we sent 1,244 invitations out, and we had 496 completed responses, which is pretty phenomenal in survey world. The majority, and unsurprisingly, 54% of that was from Delray. And yeah, we broke down the data. So respondent demographics of the total survey, not just Delray, but total. 94% of people that responded identified themselves as homeowners. 54% were female, 35% were male, and we did have a breakdown. 25 to 34 comprised about 5% of the survey, and it goes up from there. 35 to 44-year-olds were about 34%, and then the rest of the demographics all hovered about 20 to 21%. So.
Go ahead. You want to respond?
So I really appreciate the way you all did the survey and you presented your methodology, and it was very, very straightforward and easy to understand what was going on. And unfortunately, I think other people have misused the results.
Yes.
Because the way this,
Can I speak to that? really quick? Sure. And then follow up with your thoughts. No, we were really intentional about making sure this wasn't misrepresented, and it has been, but we kind of figured that might be. So just to make sure that we all understand what it is and what it is not, it was a membership survey. That was important. We said, do we want to open this up to everyone? And the answer was no, because we couldn't verify everyone that responded even lived in Alexandria. What we could verify was that it was either our members or members of the other associations that took it. I did a really quick rundown. So again, 291 responses, over 672. So this is just Delray specific. I didn't have all the data for all of the neighborhoods, or didn't have time to get them all together. But 291 of those responses were from Delray out of the 672 that we sent. So, 43.3% response rate, pretty good. I reached out to Brett Kitchen that does Greet Delray magazine, because I had a conversation with him early on about how it was that he figured out how many households to send his magazine to. His boundary, Delray, is the same as our boundary. North is East Glebe, East-West Glebe, Route 1, Russell Road, Braddock. So we have the same boundaries in our bylaws. To give you an idea, we had 291 responses to the Delray, that's unique people. He sends his magazine to literally every house, every apartment building, every townhome, everything. That's 6,000 households. So I want to be very intentional that when I speak about those results, I am speaking about a very small population of Delray. This was never meant to be a neighborhood survey, but there was no way for us to do that in a way that was accurate. It is very representative of our membership, and if anything, this is me telling the audience, if you're not a member of your local association, get involved. Your voice does matter, and it is one way to get your voice heard in a larger forum. So, we the past 3 years I've been on the board, we've been very intentional in saying we would like to reach our renters. We would like to figure out how to be more representative with more, minority members. So, yes, thank you for that point, because it was.
Yeah. So hold. My turn. So again, I appreciate that, because it's easy, very, very easy to understand what exactly is going on. And when I thought about these numbers, what people were portraying of it, which was false, that 58% of the respondents opposed the arena. I thought, wow, and that's not exactly what it says at all. So, 1,244 people were surveyed. Only 43% responded. So that's 60% of the people did not bother responding. I find that to be very significant. This is a big. I'm about to explain.
We're going to listen to our panelists.
So, the arena is a big issue. Everybody knows about it. And the civic associations are very well-informed people. They're there because they're involved. And so a survey comes out about a hot issue. 12,044 people get surveyed, and 60% are like, no, I'm not going to respond. I think that's extremely significant. Does that mean they are in favor of the arena? No. But they're not fired up about it either. So you can say that 60% of the people don't oppose. They didn't say they opposed. So hold on. All right, so the 40%. All right, let's take this room here, right? So we're going to take a vote on this. Everybody from here leave. All the rest of these people, and 58% of them oppose it. This is the facts. This is the facts. 12,044 and 496 opposed. That is.
All
I'm
right.
not arguing with the entire audience.
From
please.
the audience, we're going to listen to our panelists.
1,244 people were surveyed. 496, 25% expressed opposition. That is the truth.
All right, I'm seeing former Vice Mayor Andrew McDonald wants to. Go ahead, Katie.
Well,
Because it was my survey, I'm going to take just a second.
Sure.
So it was actually his numbers were wrong, but not in the way you guys want to hear it. So listen to this. 496 responses came in. Not all of those opposed it. I was actually very surprised that the number of opposition was at 58%.
58%.
58%. Yeah. I mean, based off and I can pick fun at yard sign wars because if anyone knows, I made the Drain ALX yard signs. Based off of the yard sign wars, you would think that number would be higher. And we were actually surprised to see it was at 58% that opposed.
So thank you. Let me just correct. 12,044 people surveyed. Out of the 43% that responded, about 309 stated opposition. So 309 out of 1,244 total surveyed, that is 25% opposed.
All right. So I on the topic of the support and or opposition from the public, we've got a lot of questions here that I'm going to wrap up into one question. I'm going to put this to our professor first about, lots of questions about a referendum. Why are we having a referendum for this thing? Professor Coates, is that something that we have seen in other jurisdictions? Like, have you seen any sort of vote, and why not, if not?
That's a great question. Referendums used to be incredibly common. And, you know, at the beginning I said if you don't get it this year, you may get it in 5 years. One of the reasons for that is because no matter when a referendum says no, they can always come back and have another referendum by changing the terms a little bit. And that's exactly what happens. So you have multiple referenda, and eventually you get to a point where enough people are in favor of it because you've changed the terms. Now, if I'm an arena proponent, or if I'm somebody who wants to have an arena built, and I know that it's going to take me 5 years, and they might vote for a smaller subsidy than I want to get away from that sort of thing. And so what has happened in the last 15 years or so is what's called no vote referenda. And that's essentially that instead of having a referendum, they go and do exactly what's happened here, which is they go directly to the politicians who find a way to do what they want to do along with the arena owners or the proponents without putting it to the people. All of the evidence on referenda is if you give the people a vote, they vote for smaller subsidies than are proposed. And that's exactly why you won't have a referenda.
Any other thoughts from anyone else on the panel about a referendum in Alexandria on the arena? Andrew McDonald.
Well, I'll 2 points. I want to just go back briefly. We now know that I think 58% of the people that voted in that survey or responded to that survey oppose the arena for various reasons, everything from traffic to financing and so on. We can debate whether this represents all of Alexandria or not.
By a long shot. It doesn't even represent, it does not even represent the neighborhoods from which they were taken.
Can I finish my remarks, please?
You can if you stick to accuracy based off the survey that my organization did. I will not let that get misrepresented. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry for that. They worked really hard on it, and it needs to be represented appropriately. If you want to look at if you want the number breakdown, let's assume for a moment those 291 responses from Del Rey alone were individual households. If you divide that by the 6,000 households we know exist within that neighborhood, that would only be 2.43%. It is representative of the associations from which signed up to take the survey, not the neighborhoods. Please represent it correctly.
Well, so would you then agree that we should have a referendum in Alexandria to decide that rather than going to... Because look, this is what Alexandria did. The politicians all stood up on December 13th down in Potomac Yard. A few neighbors, including I think Adrian Lopez, stood up with signs and said, "No way." But what most people did, they said this was a done deal. The next thing you know, AEDP is hiring a lobbyist to go down to Richmond to get this bill passed that somehow when it comes back here will be provided with more information. That's the way this is done. We've been very fortunate in Richmond to have Senator Lucas from the Portsmouth area who says in no uncertain terms Virginia taxpayers should not be the credit card for a billionaire. We should not be subsidizing with public dollars an arena with all sorts of unproven revenue projections. And again, this gets back to what Kendall Taylor, Tom has been talking about, the revenue projections. We don't know anything about the costs. We just know that it might generate 25 million, but we really don't know that. We don't know how many games that would have to be played. Well, actually, a heck of a lot of games would have to be played. So many games, in fact, that we'd have traffic gridlock several hundred days a year. We know that. So we're either going to get enough revenue, supposedly, or we're going to get so many games that we'll have just a traffic mess in Alexandria. There are so many reasons to oppose this project. And I think the majority of Alexandrians, if they had all the facts, and I think a lot of them have a pretty good sense of those already, would not approve of this. And they would not want to see a development project of this magnitude. You realize that all casino projects in Virginia require a referendum. This is by far much larger than any of those. So I think that we need to do a heck of a lot better job of working with the community to make decisions like this. And I think this one has been one of the worst decision-making processes and probably in the history of Alexandria. It's absolutely horrible.
Any other thoughts from our panel about a referendum before we move on to other topics?
I think the idea that the community input hasn't been there is a joke. There have been more meetings offered on this. I mean, you can look at the calendar. You
We're
can
going
look
to
at the
listen.
calendars, guys.
We're
You
going to
can.
listen.
I mean, you can throw all the words you want to, but there have been more meetings. Now, there's a difference between being heard and getting what you want, right? There is a difference. There have been more meetings on the books, and there would be. If this comes out of Richmond, there will be a lot more meetings. We've already, as Citizens Association presidents, there have been about 15 of us that have already had a second meeting with the city manager scheduled. Again, join your civic associations, right? They are there for a reason. We've had meetings with JBG, with Monumental, Monica Dixon. I've got their business cards. They've all said, when you're ready, we'll come speak to your membership.
I want to speak to that.
And I actually want to point out one more thing too about the statement at the beginning of this meeting. JBG and Monumental had people ready to come tonight. They just were not the decision makers. And I also know this because when I heard they weren't willing to come, I reached out to them myself and was told the same thing. They aren't the decision makers. I mean, y'all can laugh at it all you want. It's the truth. Like, people, your association
hold on.
presidents have been given these opportunities. Use them. Join your meetings.
All right,
Talk to those people.
I want to comment on what you just said, and actually we did get a question
You can
from the
laugh
audience.
all you want. It's true.
Did JBG and Monumental give any reasons why they would not be here tonight? So Monica Dixon was actually scheduled weeks in advance to be on our podcast and then canceled at the last possible minute. So the reason given was we have some immovable pieces on the calendar and can't make it work. So that was the reason that they gave. Yeah, and they're not here to defend themselves.
If you're
so
a
we're gonna
member
have
of
to move on.
DRCA, if we get them on, you're welcome to come.
All right, so I want to respond to a few things. So I still haven't heard any dollar figures out of anybody at that side of the table. Not a one. Just honestly, a lot of fear-mongering. I just don't believe it. It's just not good enough. And you know what? That's not good enough for me. I'm a taxpayer in this city. I want my taxes to stay as low as possible. And so people who don't talk about dollar figures or analyze the dollar figures and give some alternative view, I just don't buy that. Like, where's the people doubting just the fear-mongering? And some other fear-mongering that's gone on is, I'm not done. And some other fear-mongering that's been going on. The arena is not going to flood. The underground parking garage is not going to flood. There's underground parking garages all up and down Crystal City. But this is some additional fear-mongering that's going on. And as I said, Alexandria is not going to go bankrupt with $25 million if we have another pandemic and everybody dies, and the banks are still going to collect on it, all right? And then the last part, let's talk about Senator Lucas for a minute, the single person that's holding this entire thing up. Now, great. Everybody likes that. So what did Senator Lucas say when she first heard about this back on December 13th, as quoted? Yeah, yeah. She said some very uncouth things about what... She said some very uncouth things, very unprofessional things about... Oh, yeah, she did. And so the other thing that she said, and these are the people that the arena opposition is aligned with. She said, I want toll relief in Hampton Roads, and I want recreational marijuana. Some people want an arena. I want recreational marijuana. So I wonder where that's gone, since that group is now very good friends with what I will call the marijuana queen. Senator Lucas, for a very long time, has been the major proponent for marijuana legislation in this Commonwealth. And the fact is that she has absolutely been advocating for marijuana legislation while everybody knows now that she owns a cannabis shop. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, that's not fear-mongering, sir. It is in the newspaper. You should do a little research and find it. That's exactly what it is. And she said it on December 13th. December 13th, I want recreational marijuana. She tied this arena to her marijuana legislation. So you all can think about that the marijuana queen is the one that's holding up our arena and keeping your taxes high. Oh, yeah.
So I will say that I actually spoke to Senator Lucas several times during the General Assembly session. She was always a hard no from the very beginning. She did say that she had a number of things that she would like to see the governor put his signature on, one of which was retail licenses for marijuana. Yes, she was very open about that. She wanted the governor to sign a bill. You know, we currently have a situation in Virginia where it's legal to possess marijuana, but it's illegal to sell it. And lots of people think that that's a problem. Senator Lucas wanted a system for retail licenses to sell marijuana, and that was a red line for her. If she wanted the governor to put his signature on a bill to allow retail sales for marijuana, she also wanted toll relief in her region. She also wanted a raise in the minimum wage, and she was not going to move until the governor put his signature on those bills.
Sure.
I saw, wait a second, I saw Professor Coates wanted to jump in.
So I don't even know where to begin. I didn't come here to be a fearmonger. I came here to tell you the history and the research, and what has been found over time on studies that have gone back, studied time since the 60s, and what has been found. And the answer is there has never been consistently proof that these sorts of things generate jobs and tax revenues and income growth. There just isn't any by anybody who is not a paid consultant. That is the facts. If that's fear-mongering, okay, I'm a fear-monger. If you really want to talk about numbers, then you need to have those numbers in front of you. And we don't have those. We have their projections. I've seen the projections. I also know that Capital One Arena hasn't been around for 40 years. So to plan on this place operating for 40 years and generating revenue for 40 years, that's pie in the sky. They used to last about 30. Now they're lasting between 20 and 25. So if you want to pay for this in 40 years, that means you're probably going to be paying for 15 years of it after it moved back to Washington. Those are the facts. Don't plan on it being here for 40 years. It won't be. They will ask you for another one in 20 years, or they will go to Washington, or they will go to Maryland. That's what they do. If you follow the history and not what they claim, but you look at what they've done, that's what you learn.
All right, I see that Andrew McDonald wants to jump in, but I'm going to actually ask a question
I
from
have a quick follow-up.
Go ahead, Katie Wynn.
How does this lease, how does the lease structure follow the others? How have you seen that done in previous examples?
I haven't read this lease, and how could I?
We don't have it. We don't have it.
But there is a 40-year lease, correct? I mean, how you've seen? It's a bond for 40 years. There's a 20-year lease. 35. Oh, no, you're right. It is 35 because this was gone over in the JBG meeting. I'm remembering now. It was a 35-year lease, 5 given for construction. 35-year lease, 5 for construction. How does that compare to other arenas?
Well,
and how do you easily get out of that? Because that would be my next question, right? Like, it's just a lease. They're breaking it in DC. How have you seen that done elsewhere?
I'm not sure I know what you mean by how have I seen it done. You're watching it being done right now.
Right, but you've seen it in other places. Why are you laughing? Do you guys, okay, here's my question for the audience, because you all seem to have your minds made up, and that's fine. That's your prerogative. I'm here to get more answers. I'm here to ask questions and to learn. If you don't want to learn more, that's fine, but can you be quiet for the rest of us? Because I would like to know if this is so different, or if it's not different, how is it different or not?
The leases are typically about 30 years. They're not always 30 years, but they're typically about 30 years. They are frequently broken, and the reason that they're frequently broken is because facilities deteriorate, new facilities are constructed, and they generate more revenue for the team because of these new amenities, different kinds of facilities, restaurants, big screens, things of that sort, whatever makes it a more enjoyable experience for the fans. And so the team decides, this isn't generating the revenue that we know that it could, because there's alternatives that are newer that are generating more revenue. And so we want out. And then they start complaining.
All right. I am going to ask the next question here from the audience to former Vice Mayor Andrew McDonald. Why is the city government and the city government leaders always so supportive of economic development? Why did the city planning seem to be subservient, this is the question, subservient to real estate economic development only? I know that you spent a lot of time on the city council, you're former vice mayor. What's your perspective on the city's relationship and willingness to accept economic development?
Well, I mean, economic development we need. I think that's just a given. I mean, we need it because for all the reasons we've been discussing tonight, we do need a tax base. We do need to develop and add things. The question is, have we given up too much of influence to developers, key developers, and in particular, expecting them to do things that we should be doing as a community or figuring out how to do? In other words, here you have a developer from Washington, D.C. saying he's going to come in, put this arena in, paid by us. Well, that's a small detail that Senator Lucas, who, by the way, is chairwoman of the Senate Finance Committee. She's not just saying, I want, marijuana legislation and tolls. She's saying, I don't think this is a good use of Virginia taxpayer dollars. So let's be clear about what Senator Lucas is actually doing. But we need development. I think the problem has been in Alexandria for too long, and I'm afraid, former Mayor Bill Ewell illustrates that a little bit. We've placed too much of an emphasis on this relationship with developers. And the problem is we need to have, what we want to do is we're going to have development. We want to have economic development that improves our quality of life. And that gets back to my original point here. Every one of you, even those who might think it's a good idea, should have had all the facts up front, not proprietary, so that we could actually go about making more intelligent decisions than it's not that we're not making intelligent decisions right now, but we would like to have had all these facts right up front so we could have a discussion. Instead, what did the city do? They hired lobbyists, they sent them down to Richmond to get the bill passed before any of us had a chance to see any of the facts. So I think we need economic I think we need economic development.
Is our city council useless? My question is our city council useless then?
I think our city council in this case did us a real disfavor. I think they
They voted already? Have they
Well,
voted?
So if
what they did
This is not a done deal. Why are we acting as though it is? It might still die.
Can I
Let
just
us
can I
finish.
just finish my quick remarks? So what I think the city council did here, they thought they were representing us, and I think a lot of us would disagree that they were representing us. They said this was a good deal, trust us, and went on, and instead of engaging the community properly. So I don't think that's a good way of going about it, doing the business of the city, of the community. So I think in this case, the city council really let us down, every one of them.
Because they
Okay,
voted.
so, all right.
So,
He's done.
Go ahead, Tom.
All right. So, I mean, I just find that amazing, considering that your group, I know, feels like you've had a very strong influence on this legislation, yet you're criticizing the process for not being able to provide input. So there's this whole time period of interaction, your own lobbying, including the city's lobbying and all these other things. So there is time. We haven't even gotten to the debate in the city. So I argue there's lots of time, and your folks are quite happy with themselves. So I don't understand the complaint.
I would also argue that, to me, when I hear that the city has a meeting in which AEDP was present, I believe our entire city council was present, and there was a bus driving around the neighborhood intentionally blaring music loud enough that no one could be heard. That's not true. It was in the newspaper. There are videos. Okay, you're doing it to me right now.
All right, not from
But-
the audience. We're going to
but
listen to
the
our
truth
panelists. We're going to
is
listen
that
to our
if you
panelists.
constantly take the oxygen out of the room because you're yelling, again, the people that are there to learn, the people that are there to ask more questions don't get to do that. That's the process, and that process still can play out if this makes it out of Richmond, right? Like, this could all be a moot point.
All right, I actually am getting the hook here signed from our board, more than one of our board members who are saying it's really time to wrap this thing up. So I'm going to have a final question from our audience that I'm going to put to all of our panelists here, starting with Tom Kopko, and we're going to work down our panel here. Thank you so much for coming to our panel. This has been fun. So this is a good way to end the panel. It's actually kind of a coda to the very first question that I asked, which was, is this thing happening or not? Question from the audience: how will we know when this is over? How will we know when the fat lady sings? I mean, we actually talked, one of the first things that was like, it could be 5 years from now. We could be continuing this conversation for 5 years. It is kind of a trick question, but I'm going to put it to you, Tom Kopko, first. How will we know when this is over?
Wow. Well, the process is long. Let's say that the legislation somehow passes in Richmond, and then the city council somehow passes that, and then there's the whole period of negotiating the terms of the bonds, because the city gets a very exact say on what excess funds they get and what constitutes what excess funds that the authority pays to Virginia and Alexandria. So there's that whole thing. It could fall through if Alexandria doesn't like the terms of the bond and they don't like how often we get paid. So maybe after the bonds finally get issued and those bond funds start flowing in, maybe that's it.
Katie Waynick, how will we know when this is over?
I don't know. I look to the expert. I don't know. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see over the next couple months. I don't think a legislative session is going to happen, personally. I think that's probably the least likely. Special session, thank you. That seems to be incredibly unpopular for a number of reasons. My guess is that it will fail in the amendment process. I'm going to let the experts speak to the rest, though, because I think the point he made at the very beginning was pretty impactful.
Actually, I'm going to change our order here and put the professor last. Put the professor for that very reason, because I also want to know what he has to say about this. Andrew McDonald, I'm going to let you ask the question. Andrew McDonald, we began this discussion by saying this could go on for years, even though it kind of seems dead right now. This thing could sort of linger on. How will we know when this debate is actually over?
Well, I know we're all hoping it's soon, or at least we're going to know when it's not in the budget. I mean, and again, I think April 17th is probably a very good chance that we'll know that day. I think it's going to fail, and I think it should fail. I think that the evidence is, among all the elected officials in Virginia, is growing, that it's not a good thing for Virginia taxpayers. It's certainly not good, I don't think, for Alexandria taxpayers. But unfortunately, in the group that I'm working with, it's a wonderful group of citizens and some folks from the National Consumer League and Sports Authority, Sports Affairs group, sports fans, excuse me. We're working very hard to make sure this fails, because it should fail.
And last but certainly not least, our academic expert. So you've looked at these all over the country. Do these things tend to drag on for years and years and years, or is there kind of a relatively swift resolution to these kinds of things?
It depends on what you mean by drag on for years and years and years. So I'll give you an example. There is a team in San Francisco called the San Francisco Giants. They wanted a new stadium, and in around 1987, there was a referendum that failed. A couple years later, 89, 90, 91, something like that, there was another referendum, and that also failed. In between, they went to the South Bay. I'm not remembering the name of the city on the South Bay, and they had a referendum there that failed. They went back to San Francisco for a fourth referendum, and that passed. That took roughly 8 to 10 years. So when I said at the beginning that this process is one that maybe will fail this time, there's no guarantee that it will fail forever, because until the shovels are in the ground, there's always the possibility that they are going to get it passed, get through, and they'll find a way. So was it constant for all of those years? No, because they moved from one city to another trying to get it. I would not be at all surprised if this doesn't fail, if you find out that they are talking to Arlington or they're talking to the Maryland suburbs or something. I would not be at all surprised to find that, because they've got 3 jurisdictions here, 3 states, so to speak, here, plus multiple counties, all of them that would love to be told, if you just build us a stadium, we're going to bring you all of this money. And so will it end this time? Maybe. But you have, if you're opposed, you have to be vigilant. And I want to say one other thing. I have been asked this question many, many times. And my answer is, there's 2 ways to think about this if you are faced with a referendum. The first is, do I believe their projections about job creation, income growth, tax revenue growth, and so on? If you are voting on that, don't buy any of that and think about what is the next best use we could have for the money we're spending here. I don't know what that is. I wouldn't presume to speak for you. If you think that the next best use is more valuable than the arena and whatever the arena might generate, then you should vote against it. If, on the other hand, you're a sports fan and you believe that you're going to get, for your family, roughly $100 a year worth of benefit from being able to attend games in the arena and follow them, even if you don't go, if you just talk about the games around the water cooler and that generates for you $100 worth of benefit a year, then you should vote yes. That's probably a good idea. It screws your neighbors, but it's what's best for you. So there's two ways to think about it: what is personally best for me and what is the right thing to do for the community. And depending on how you come down on those two things, you can come up with a different answer on whether you support this or not.
All right, this has been fun, illuminating, and mostly civil, so thank you so much. And I'd like to thank our panelists.
On behalf of Agenda Alexandria, thank you all for coming and paying attention. With regard to our April program, we've never done this before, but depending on what happens in Richmond in the middle of April, we may have a second panel on this proposal, drilling down on traffic, on metro, on housing, on jobs, and we'll give the sponsors a chance to come again. But so just stay tuned to our webpage. We may end up looking at this a little more deeply if it passes in Richmond. Thank you very much for coming.
This is Agenda Alexandria, a nonpartisan organization that takes a look at the issues without taking sides. Whether it's the city's sewer system, education, public safety, climate change, or perhaps a look back into Alexandria's history, Agenda Alexandria is here to shine a light. What makes the organization so successful is our people. The people who run it, our panelists, our moderators, and of course, our members. Agenda Alexandria is a member-funded organization, and we invite you to become one today by visiting agendaalexandria.org.